to Nightjar Diner.
We're gonna take you behind the menu. Come, let's grab you something to eat.
My name is Sean Hanna. I'm one of the co-owners of Nightjar Diner company here in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Our menu is diverse. There's a tendency to try to pigeonhole restaurants into certain categories. Like this is a pizza restaurant, this is a Chinese food restaurant, this is what I like to describe is that we're very much a new Canadian restaurant. I mean, the story of Canada is really about a bunch of different cultures that are sort of, wandering about, running into each other and then exchanging these ideas. We like taking bits and pieces from all these cultures and kind of combining them in ways that make sense for where we are in Saskatchewan. And, kind of pushing our guests a little forward too. I mean, you'll find a burger on our menu, but you'll also find really complicated, like we'll do duck, we'll do, halibut, cod, trying things that may be outside of their comfort zone, but we have to make them comfortable first, and that's the big goal.
Thank you. Just the uniqueness of their meals. I always find that you just never know what's going to be on the menu, and it's going to be something different than what you would get elsewhere.
My husband and I have traveled quite a bit and have been to some pretty fancy restaurants, and this is right up there with all of them, and I love the effort that they make to put it into the food, and you can tell that he cares about his creations.
I think there was an expectation, I think Derek would agree, that there's this expectation that we were going to be the fanciest place on the block, and that's certainly true to a degree. I mean, that we do make everything in-house. I mean, and the things that we don't make in-house is because we can't do as well as somebody else does. The word diner, Nightjar Diner, was really that way of getting into or being more accessible, right? There was no sense of like handing somebody a menu that had 14 different languages or the different techniques that we deploy on the menu. At the end of the day, we're just, we want to make good food that's really made well and people can connect over. I mean, so often you go out to restaurants and people are, distracted by televisions or, they're on their phone. I mean, you could swap out most people's guests wholesale and they would never notice it by how often they're kind of distracted with their day-to-day. What we really want is people to come in and eat great food and really sit down and connect with each other. Even our cocktails are all 2 ounces. They're very booze forward, but they're things that you don't slam back and get tipsy on. They're things that you spend time with, and that's really what we want, is people to come in and spend some time, right? We're always on the guest time when they come in, and yeah.
My name's Derek Sandercock. I'm co-owner at Nightjar Diner Company and one of the chefs here. But I also dabble in bartending. And today I'm going to walk you through one of the cocktails that we make here at Nightjar Diner. We like to take cocktails that are kind of classic prohibition era cocktails and update them a little bit or provide a little bit of a twist to it. So the cocktail that we're making today is called the Bee's Knees. I believe it was invented in the 1920s by an Austrian bartender at the Ritz in France, Paris, France. It's kind of a spin on what's known as a gin sour, which is generally made with gin, lemon, and simple syrup, which is castor sugar and water. But that bartender did a spin on the gin sour by putting a honey syrup in it instead of the simple syrup. So today we're going to be using honey from the Prairie Field Honey Company, which is here in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Fantastic family business that we use their honey in a lot of different things here in the restaurant. But for the honey syrup itself, we'll take some of their honey and mix it with 1 part honey to a half part water, or 2 parts honey to 1 part water. Bring that to a boil and we create honey syrup. We're also using fresh lemons in this, and this contraption here is my juicer. So just to start off, I'm going to juice a couple lemons in here. And we're going to need an ounce of lemon juice. We're also going to need an ounce of each of our spirits in this cocktail. Oh yeah, so the Nightjar twist on the bee's knees is that we're using elderflower liqueur as well as the gin and honey in there. So elderflower liqueur is made from elderflowers. It's a product of France as well. It's only been around since the mid-aughts, so this wouldn't have been a spin that they could have done back in the Prohibition era, but it adds this really nice floral flavor, and honestly, I can't picture having the bee's knees any other way at this point. So we'll start with our shaker and some locally sourced ice cubes here. And we've got our jigger. We're going to measure out a full ounce of gin and a full ounce of our Saint Germain. And we're going to do a full ounce of our freshly squeezed lemon juice. And then with the honey, we're going to, because the elderflower actually has a bit of sweetness to it, we're going to just do a 3/4 ounce of that one in there. And then vigorously shake. All right. Now, this is a Hawthorne strainer, and we're going to strain into our crystal glass here. We're going to double strain it. We're going to get those shards of ice cube out of this as well. Cocktail. And then to finish off, we're actually just going to add a little lemon zest garnish. But I might just cut that down a little bit. Add a little bit of flair to it. Let's see here. There you go. The Bee's Knees by Nightjar Diner.
So Derek and I met back in 2016, 2015. And you know, both he and I had a culinary background from just working in the industry for years. Both he and I, when we moved to the area, we both found that there was kind of a lack of the culinary scene and culinary traditions that we were really excited about. And so we got together in about 2016 to start pop-up restaurants, partially as a creative outlet, just to see what we could do and see if there was a market for food that was a little bit better than what people might be used to, and it was very successful. We had great response, and both he and I were both at a stage where we were looking to venture out on our own and start our own little business and open up a restaurant here in Swift Current. The location kind of came to us. There was an existing restaurant here, and I've known the owner for a few years, and he was basically looking to exit the industry and kind of take a more landlord approach to his spaces, and it was a very easy way to start a restaurant. So we basically took over his space, did some renovations to make it our own, and we went from there. We wanted a name that was, at the same time that it was locally inspired or had a connection to locality, we also wanted a name that was a little bit obscure. What ended up happening is we were flipping through a book of the flora and fauna of Saskatchewan. We came across this class of birds called nightjars. And we liked the name Nightjar because it had this sense of it'd be a place to go get a cocktail without saying, Nightjar Restaurant or Nightjar Eatery or whatever. And then we started reading more about these birds, and it turns out they're nocturnal. They live very much in the area. They eat around supper time, like we eat, about 7 o'clock. And So it was like a perfect metaphor, and it just sort of all kind of came together. It turns out their Latin name is Caprimulgidae, which means goat sucker, which is hilarious to us. I mean, it sounds like something you'd yell out of your car window in traffic, but it was just, everything was sort of pointing towards that sort of humor and levity and connection to Saskatchewan. So yeah, that's how the name came about.
The other cocktail that I'm making for you today is called the Healy. So this is one of the very first cocktails that we created when we opened Nightjar Diner. One of my favorite cocktails to drink, which isn't exactly a Prohibition era cocktail, but it drinks like one, is the Godfather, which is generally made of Scotch and Amaretto. So we did a bit of a spin on this, where we're using 3 different whiskeys instead of just Scotch. So today I got a Glenfiddich 12-year, and then we're putting in a Canadian rye, 12 barrels from Ontario, and an American bourbon. So it'll be equal parts of those, half ounce of each, and then we're going to put in a half ounce of amaretto, nice almond liqueur in there. Generally when you have it in the restaurant, it has been actually aged in oak barrel. We have some custom made oak barrels that we put all these ingredients in en masse, age it for 3 months or more, and then when you order one of these cocktails, you'll have this wood-aged liqueur that goes into the glass with the ice. So we're just going to build one for you here today though. So my jigger, this is a nice 2-ounce side to the jigger here versus 1 ounce, so I can build all of my ingredients in this side here and I don't have to waste any time. We're going to go 1/4 ounce of each. Topping with our Scotch. And then another twist that Nightjar has added is our house-made grapefruit bitters here. So I'm going to give it a good dash of that. I'm going to give her a little stir. We're just going to set that aside while we prep the glass side of this. So for this, we get to play with fire, which is always fun. When we do this in the restaurant, every single table stops and looks like, what is that? I need to get one of those right now. So get a little flame going. Let's get a little more flame going. I want to get lots of smoke off that. And I'm going to place an ice cube on here. And we're going to actually smoke the ice cube now as well. So once the glass is filled with smoke, I'm going to move it over to the ice cube there. And we're going to let the pores in the ice cube kind of fill up with some of that smoke flavor for a moment. And then slide the ice cube off here. And then we're going to actually pour over our whiskey. And to finish it off, we actually have some sour cherries that we have compressed with amaretto and some orange liqueur as well. Nice little garnish there. Cheers.
So we're going to show you our prairie cut ribs here at Nightjar. So what makes our cut of ribs a little different is rather than a St. Louis style of rib, which would just be that rib bone that you would get, we actually leave the belly meat attached to the rib itself. So what you end up getting is this beautiful, thick piece of belly meat with some really unctuous fat, as well as the rib meat here on the reverse side. So the first step to this is we need to portion this down. Obviously this pork belly is a little bit big to work with. So we're just going to score into the meat and basically find out where the bones are so that we can hack through them with Bertha here. So once we have these beautiful little pork bellies broken down into a piece that's manageable for a portion, what we're going to do is we cure these with salt, just straight salt. We're using kosher salt, covering all sides. It seems like a lot of salt, but this is a big chunk of meat with a lot of fat on it that will pack in salt and let rest for about 24 hours overnight in the refrigerator. The idea here is that it helps to season the meat, but it also helps to kill any harmful bacteria that might be on the surface of it. So, we're always being very cautious and careful about food safety. It's really important. But it also changes the texture slightly. This will, as you can see, like this meat right now at room temperature is pretty soft. After about 24 hours of cure, this belly will firm right up. So after 24 hours later, we've taken the pork out of its cure, we've rinsed it off, we've dried it. We've also cleaned the underside of it. There's a little membrane that's attached, not great to eat. The next thing what we're going to do is we're going to actually marinate this in something called shio-koji. Koji is a type of, kind of like a mushroom. If you've ever had something like soy sauce or mirin, miso, sake, any of that, you've definitely had a product that has koji in it. So what we do, we actually make koji here at the restaurant. It takes a couple of days to grow. Once we grow it, we mix it with salt and water, and then we ferment it for a few more days. And then you have a product called shio-koji. Shio-koji will help to break down a lot of those tough connective tissues. It'll also add this amazing umami flavor to the dish. So it's pretty easy to do. Once you have the product in place, we're just going to completely coat and cover the entire piece of pork belly and rib with this shio-koji, covering it really well. Then this will go back into the refrigerator and sit overnight. So we work with a local butcher to get all of our meat product in, or as close as possible. The pork that they're getting in is Saskatchewan made or Saskatchewan produced. Saskatchewan is the most food stable province in the world, and I think that's something that people should be proud of in our province. And we have in the Southwest some of the greatest suppliers of grains and lentils, but also honey and eggs. I mean, like, this is all happening. Milk is produced here. I mean, there's a bunch of things that are produced here and locally that we can source, and shortening that supply chain to as they should say, farm to table, right, has always been very important to us. A chain restaurant is farm to table in many ways, right? There's just a lot of middlemen to get there. We still have to work with larger suppliers because we still need to get ingredients in the door. But if we can, if we can support local, we do. That's where we want to put our dollars, and that was always something that was very important to us. And in terms of the kinds of things that we do locally. In the summertime when we actually have a growing season, all of our produce is coming from Clean Spades Farms, which is located right in the city, and the quality is just night and day when we're able to get it right out of your backyard. I mean, you can be the greatest chef in the world, and if you're not working with great products, then your food is going to be just mediocre at best, right? We are able to work with honey all year round because that's something that is produced in abundance. Grains, locally milled flours. Our coffee comes from Badlands, which is a local roaster. So where we can support local, we do, and incorporate that as often in our menus as we can.
It brings you back to what real homemade food is, and it reminds you of what quality ingredients are, and it's as farm to table as possible for the local area. It's just really quality made food, and your dollars are being spent locally, so it's a really good feel-good place to go.
One of the biggest draws on our menu for local produced items is actually our beef that we use. So we use a breed of cattle called Speckled Park. Speckled Park is actually the only breed of cow that's native to Saskatchewan. So it was kind of bred back in the 50s and 60s and then designated as a breed. It's a little bit stockier than what you would get from like an Angus or Red Angus, Black Angus, and it doesn't finish the same way. So I mean, for the cow to really finish with a nice dense marbling, it really needs to be fed and taken care of. So these are cows that have lived really good lives. We have a really close relationship with not only the rancher Vince, but also the butcher to make sure that they've been treated well. That animal lived a good life, and that's kind of it's a kind of an ethical choice, but it also is a flavor. It makes a difference in the flavor at the end of the day. There's been a real sense of supporting local because, if you don't support local, then you don't have wonderful little restaurants, little coffee shops, little, great little shops to spend your money, or, it becomes this sort of impoverished place, and you start to think less of your own community. But when you prioritize, if you choose to afford putting your dollars locally, you actually do get this great return on just developing a community that is a great place to be, right?
Great, so typically for service, what we're doing is assembling all the bits and pieces. So we actually already have our mise set up with vegetables and cornbread, the accompaniments, the various garnishes that are going to go with this pork rib dish. When we actually do reheat the pork dish, we're going to hit it with this really beautiful gelatinous pork stock. Part of it is the cooking liquid that the pork was braised in. But that'll help to kind of keep that moisture really into the meat there. Next thing we'll do is we'll baste it. And this is a house barbecue sauce that we make here. And so we'll brush it, and we'll actually go back several times throughout the cooking process and make sure that the barbecue sauce is fully adhered, completely coated, and it's everything you want in a rib. I'm going to start by toasting up some poblano cornbread that we make in-house. Lots of buttermilk. Poblanos are of these beautiful peppers. They're not crazy spicy, but they definitely got a nice little heat. So for plating, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the Saskatoon berry gastrique. Gastrique is basically like a sweet and sour sauce. We use, of course, locally produced Saskatoon berries because they're delicious. And we're just going to lay on a nice little bed to work with on our board. Dressing our board. Next, we're going to go in with these beautiful toasted cornbread croutons. Now we're going to garnish our accompaniment with these Brussels sprouts. So finally, we have the pork belly right there. Just before service, we're going to hit it with some fried shallots. It gives a nice texture, brings a little bit of onion flavor to the dish. And that's our prairie cut ribs here at Nightjar.
I've never had a job that's as much fun as this job. I do a lot of the administrative work, which is a lot of paperwork, kind of dry and dull and boring, which I kind of also enjoy. But when I get bored with that, I can go off and just go and make a guest happy. And when I get bored of doing that, I can go and make a dessert or work on some bread or do some graphic design for the restaurant. And so it's using all sorts of creativities that I have that really helps me keep engaged and interested. So that's my favorite part about running this restaurant, right? I mean, I'm always learning new things too. I mean, it's always this constant process of trial and error and learning how to fail and fail spectacularly. I mean, the last cocktail menu that we made, I think we went through 40 different cocktails before we found one that was good enough to put on our menu full time, right? So, learning how to, really embrace failure and come up with this constant sense of editorializing your process and just making something at the end of the day that's delicious that people love and they're happy with and can take home is pretty cool.
Is there a restaurant or beverage producer you'd like to see featured on MaxTV Local? Email us at max.local@sastel.com.